Who will win Super Bowl 59? Will it be a three-peat for the back-to-back Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes? Or will the fightin' Philadelphia Eagles pull off the upset? That is the question. Also, which players will perform under the bright lights of Super Sunday? In this video, the official OwnersBox Super Bowl 59 preview, I will provide my pick for the game, my prediction for Super Bowl MVP, and 14 prop picks scattered throughout the video. So, make sure to spike the like button and let me know in the comments who you think will win Super Bowl 59. If you want to provide your Super Bowl MVP, fantastic, phenomenal. Let me know in the comments. Love to hear your feedback and your picks. This game has Kansas City favored just slightly by 1, maybe 1.5. And I wouldn't be shocked if it gets closer to a pick'em before kickoff. The total is sitting at 48.5, and I wouldn't be shocked if it moved back up in the direction of 49 or 49.5 before kickoff. This, of course, is a Super Bowl rematch of Super Bowl 57. 38-35 Kansas City. And in classic Kansas City fashion, the Chiefs won the game from a controversial call. Let's get started with the Eagles offense versus the Chiefs defense, which I think is the side of the football that is not most fascinating to me, but the side of the ball that I think will dictate the game. If the Eagles are able to have early down success, do what they want to do, press the easy buttons of their offense, which is run the ball, Saquon Barkley, all day, all night, then the Eagles are very well going to control the pace of the game, going to get a lead, and going to be able to count on their defense to get enough stops to win. If they cannot be stopped on the ground, they are going to win. It's that simple, okay? Now, that's where we have to begin. Saquon versus the Chiefs run defense. He has 100+ rushing yards in 9 of his last 10 games. It's outrageous. He's had a historic season. He might have the best season we've ever seen from a running back individually. He actually has a chance to set the most rushing yards in a single campaign from a regular season and a postseason combined, ahead of Terrell Davis from 1998 with the Denver Broncos. Way back then. That was also the last Super Bowl MVP. And as far as I understand it, Saquon's initials are SB, Super Bowl. Just putting that together. But Kansas City's run defense has been up and down throughout the season. Started off really well, one of the best units in the league, but since week 10, their run defense ranks 19th in rush EPA, and it also ranks 21st in rush success rate. That is not very good. They're taking on the best running back in the league, the most explosive running back in the league, and a running game that they have not seen all season. Now, in Super Bowl 57, Steve Spagnuolo did a great job of limiting a similarly awesome run game, but not quite the same level, but still pretty good. Miles Sanders had only 7 rushes for 16 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. And remember, the Eagles were running the ball on pretty much everybody that season because of their dominant offensive line. In 2023, a game in which the Eagles won the rematch last regular season, DeAndre Swift had 12 carries for 76 yards, pretty productive and efficient on the ground. That was a defensive game though, 21-17. Now, recently, the Chiefs' run defense the last 2 games has allowed pretty productive days to James Cook and Joe Mixon in the playoffs. James Cook averaged 6.5 yards per carry. He had 88 on his own. Buffalo had 147. The Texans had 149 as a team. Joe Mixon had 85 and 4.9 yards per carry. Considering that Mixon had kind of been not great before that game, that is a pretty indicative stat that Mixon was so successful against Kansas City. Shows the weakness that they've had as of late. The Chiefs are going to have to count on some of their extra beefy, big defensive tackles like Wharton, Pennell, and Nandi to step up and make some plays in this game. But I think the most important matchup is how Spags deploys his linebackers, specifically Leo Chanel in this game. Leo Chanel is their third linebacker. He's a big guy, he's a great run defender, and he's been highly impactful in the last 2 Super Bowl rematches, or matchups, I should say. This will be a rematch. But in terms of the Eagles, and they were both rematches, actually, 49ers and Eagles, right? And the 49ers had a similarly awesome running back and great running game, although more based on the scheme of Kyle Shanahan and less based on the talent of the offensive line. While Philadelphia does not have a great scheme, they just have an awesome offensive line. They overpower you. They're more athletic than you. And Saquon is incredible and even more explosive than Christian McCaffrey. He takes it to the next level. While McCaffrey was more of a receiver threat from the position than I would say Saquon is this season. But Leo Chanel is big because it will indicate whether the Chiefs are willing to play base personnel. In that Super Bowl a couple years ago, they played a lot more base personnel than typical, and Chanel played a big role, rather as a stack linebacker off the line or on the edge to set the edge. And they often had 8 or even 9 players in the box to defend the run of Philadelphia, which allowed Jalen Hurts to have a lot of one-on-one matchups, and that's why Jalen Hurts was so good through the air in that game. A lot of NFL fans don't really know that, but it was based on the fact that Spagnuolo did whatever he could to take away the Eagles from running the ball and forcing the ball into Jalen Hurts' hands to beat him. And Jalen Hurts nearly did it. Give him a lot of credit. He might have to do that again if the Chiefs take a similar approach. The thing is, we've seen Saquon break through some heavy box defenses where a lot of defenses are stuffing the box and trying to make plays behind the line of scrimmage. And sure, Saquon will be brought down for a -1, a -2, occasionally a 2-yard or 3-yard gain, but he might also be able to break one, unlike Miles Sanders, and really open this game up with an explosive rush. So by packing the box with more players, it also leads to more explosives if you miss your tackle. Luckily, the Chiefs are the best team at not missing tackles. They rank the best in the NFL in that category. Overall, given the lack of success from Kansas City's run defense against somebody like James Cook or Joe Mixon, I know that both of those offenses maybe had more of a reliable passing threat from their quarterback position. I still feel like everyone knew Buffalo was going to try to run the ball. Everybody knew Houston loved to establish it on early downs, and the Chiefs were still not able to stop it. So unless Spagnuolo comes up with something absolutely incredible, I find it hard that Saquon is not going to at least have a good game. I don't expect him to have an amazing game because Spagnuolo's done a great job in all of his Super Bowls of limiting running backs and especially great rushing attacks, but this is a different threat that I don't think that he has ever seen before. You include that with Jalen Hurts' ability to run, and it's a big threat, right? Kansas City has allowed 4 straight quarterbacks to rush for 39 yards or more, including even CJ Stroud, but also Josh Allen. Okay? So that's why my first prop is going to have an early score from Philadelphia. The first touchdown in this game will be scored by Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley at +210. Okay, Hurts had 3 touchdowns in Super Bowl 57. The Chiefs typically always start slow in the Super Bowl. They're always trailing at halftime, which will lead us to another bet later in this video. But that's why I think Philadelphia gets on the board first with the first score, Saquon or Hurts. I think the Eagles will try to test the waters of Spagnuolo's plan, try to run the ball early, see if it's successful, and once they get close to the red zone, they're going to run the ball. I wouldn't even be shocked if Saquon hit a home run nearly in the first quarter, because that's what he's been doing in these games in the playoffs. Now, another key contributor to the Eagles' offense in the run game is actually their tight end, Dallas Goedert. A big difference maker has been Goddard run blocking. When he is on the field, they run the ball for 6.3 yards per carry, which is outrageous. That's like Jim Brown level stuff. 4.9, still pretty good when he is off the field. When they run it to his side of the field, 5.8 yards per carry versus only 2.9 on the other side of the football field. Now, this leads us to the conversation of Dallas Goedert, which is going to be our next prop for the video. Dallas Goedert going over his receiving prop. Goddard is going to be featured in this game plan, not only as a run blocker leading the way for Saquon Barkley It shows how important he is to their team, but also he is the biggest mismatch in this game. He had a great Super Bowl 57 against the Chiefs, and it felt like he had 100 plus yards and 10 plus catches and 15 targets, but he actually only had 6 catches on 7 targets for 60 yards. It just felt like every single time he caught the ball in that game, it was a big play or it was a third down conversion, a fourth down or something. But Goddard will be involved in the RPOs, releasing to the flats and getting open early because the Chiefs are overcompensating for the run and they're peeking their eyes in the backfield and Goddard slips out. He'll be involved in any play action plays. He'll also be involved in one-on-one, man-to-man separation, where he is the best tight end in the NFL. 3.62 yards per route run versus man coverage this season. Dallas Goedert separates. He's a great route runner, and he's big, he's long, he's fast, he's physical, and he often gets great mismatches because A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley take up so much attention. A defense can only put their resources in so many places. You've got to deal with A.J. Brown, a true number 1 threat. You've got to deal with Devontae Smith, an excellent number 2. You've got to deal with stopping Saquon and then stopping Jalen Hurts in the run game, and all of a sudden Dallas Goedert gets linebackers and slower and less athletic players to cover him. So I believe he'll go over 50.5 receiving yards. The Chiefs gave up the most yards to tight ends this season with 1,191 yards and the 4th most catches to the position among all teams. He also had 85 yards versus Washington, which led the team in the NFC Championship. And he also led the team in the divisional round, but he also had 85 yards in the NFC Championship. I believe A.J. Brown had more yards in the NFC Championship. But regardless, he went off in both games, and I could see Hurts relying on him on 3rd down and 4th down quite often in this game because it's going to be the simplest matchup to go to. Now, the other matchups that are fascinating to watch are A.J. Brown, of course, and who do the Chiefs decide to put on A.J. Brown? Is it going to be Trent McDuffie? Are they going to try to put Jalen Watson and double him? This is going to indicate where you want to place your money and kind of like where you want some prop picks to be had. In my opinion, I think they're going to try to put Trent McDuffie on him, but I also feel like at times they'll double him in certain situations. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer, but the reason I say McDuffie is because McDuffie has played 98% of his snaps in the playoffs on the outside of the defense, so perimeter cornerback, where A.J. Brown always plays perimeter cornerback. I also saw some highlights of that game in Super Bowl 57 where A.J. Brown was man-to-man with McDuffie, and he actually mossed him in the end zone for a touchdown, just saying. But A.J. Brown is interesting against the Chiefs in particular because he is the best receiver in the NFL versus not only man, 4.04 yards per route run, best in the league, but also he's the best receiver in the NFL against press coverage. And the Chiefs press the most in the NFL. So they're inside 2 yards at the wide receiver, pressing him, getting hands on him. Okay, he had 5 catches for 92 yards in Super Bowl 57 against press. So he'll be able to beat McDuffie one-on-one, in my opinion, if they ask McDuffie to press, because he's bigger, stronger, and even faster than McDuffie, as good as McDuffie is. Devontae Smith, though, is interesting because he will be the guy that's often going to be in the slot. And the biggest mismatch that I think the Eagles could have, even beyond Dallas Goedert, could be Devontae Smith, because Connor has been the nickel corner for the Chiefs, and they'll want Connor to be the nickel corner because he's basically a linebacker or a safety, so he's another big body that will be involved in the run game and also blitzing Jalen Hurts. So I want to say that they'll keep Trent McDuffie on the outside more often than not because they want to defend the run with Saquon, right? Because he's such a threat. So if that's a matchup, Connor and Devontae Smith is going to torch him because Connor allowed the 3rd highest completion percentage at the nickel position this year. He is not a good one-on-one player. And so you would think Kansas City would tend to play more zone just based on some of these numbers than man, and especially some of these matchups. But if they do go to man, Devontae could go over his longest reception prop, where he has gone over this number 2 out of 3 times in the playoffs, also 11 out of 16 times this season. But I like him to maybe even have a huge game. Like, I'm talking, this is our next prop pick. Leading the game in receiving at plus 500. Why? He did it in the Super Bowl last time. He had 100 yards in the Super Bowl and 99 yards in the other game last year. So he's had 99 yards and 100 yards in these past 2 matchups against Kansas City. So they've put more of a focus on A.J. Brown and slowing down A.J. Brown. And they've put more of a focus on stopping the run. they have left Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert to have big games against them. And I expect that to be a similar approach in Super Bowl 59. So I like Devontae Smith to lead the game in receiving plus 500 as a little bit of a long shot bet. The Chiefs have also not really played, and this is an interesting one if you're thinking about Devontae Smith, because they have not played two star receivers on the same team all year. The closest you would argue is Tank Dell and Nico Collins for 3 quarters in that game in the regular season. But other than that, San Francisco didn't have all their receivers when they played them. Ayuk got hurt very early. Debo didn't play. Tampa Bay didn't have Godwin or Evans when they played. Cincinnati didn't have T. Higgins. The Bills don't have star receivers really, and the Ravens don't really have them either other than Zay Flowers. So there's no number 2. So to me, this is also a different beast. Not only do they have to defend Saquon, but this will be the first time really all season truly that the Chiefs will have to find out whether or not L'Jarius Sneed will be the difference between them three-peating or not. Because they haven't played two players of this caliber, Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, two receivers considered top 25 in the NFL. You know what I'm saying? So that's an interesting one. But the biggest matchup of them all on this side of the football is Jalen Hurts versus Steve Spagnuolo. And it will come down to the Chiefs, their ability to not only defend Saquon and create some negatives. Like I said, they're not gonna be able to completely destroy him, completely, take him out of the game, but can they contain him enough, create some negatives occasionally? When they do create those negatives, do they get to Hurts? And do they confuse him? Do they get some pressure on him? Because Jalen Hurts, his splits when he's clean and when he's pressured are drastically different. He's the worst quarterback in the league when he is pressured. 37 out of 37 in success rate, 37 and 37 in EPA per attempt, 33 out of 37 in sack rate, 32 out of 37 in yards per attempt. He is not a good quarterback when he is under pressure, okay? So can Spagnuolo find a way to get pressure? Because the problem is the Eagles' O-line is so good that you have to blitz to get pressure, right? And Kansas City's not good when they only rush 4 players. They're actually the 30th defense in EPA per pass play when they don't blitz this season. So the Eagles, if they have time, and if the Eagles, if the Chiefs just sit back there and they play a lot of zone, or they play man and they play their cover 2 man with 2 safeties deep, and they force Hurts to kind of dance in the pocket and find somebody, he's going to be able to do that more often than not. And they're going to win their matchups, like I said, with Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, or Dallas Goedert. It's just too hard to defend, even Saquon Barkley out of the backfield, right? But if they blitz them, that's where things could get dicey. But you can only really blitz if you are in a situation to blitz. So for the Eagles, can you avoid that? Can you go more no huddle in this game, which the Eagles tend to do after they get a first down? Can you run more play action, where Spags and his defense traditionally struggles against play action, right? They're 28th versus play action this season, 116 rating for Jalen Hurts when he uses play action. That could be an early down feature. If the Chiefs are trying to overcommit to the run, that's when you pull off some play action plays, get Hurts moving the pocket, get him out, get him throwing to Dallas Goedert or Saquon on the move, get some yards after catch, things like that. And Hurts was pretty impressive against the Commanders in the pocket. He had a phenomenal game, the highest EPA per play of any quarterback in any playoff game this century with 20-plus dropbacks. So he's coming off a hot game. He's coming off a good game where he was seeing the field well, where he was throwing the ball well, where he was playing clean. The Eagles are 9-0 when Jalen Hurts passes for 200 yards this season, which is pretty crazy because usually when a quarterback throws for more yards, typically it's kind of counterintuitive. Sometimes you want him to throw for less, especially this team, because you would think the more they run it, the more they win, right? But 9-0 when they have 200-plus yards from Hurts. And Hurts also has the most passing yards in the regular season, 387, and the postseason against the Chiefs in his entire career. So that's kind of an interesting stat too, that he's played his most productive passing games from a passing yard standpoint against the Chiefs. So maybe some passing props for Hurts are also open here. If you don't want to go with Saquon and his rushing props and you feel like Hurts is going to have to throw to win, I could see that. Now, I don't have anything for you in this video, but it's something to consider, and I might even consider it myself now that I've really talked about it. Being a little counterintuitive on early downs occasionally, but if they're able to run the ball, that's going to set themselves up for third and manageables And that's going to allow them to be in situations where Spags can't get his bread and butter, right? That's how they're going to win this game. Because if you allow him to sit in those blitz packages, the Chiefs are going to win. Because I think ultimately Hurts isn't good enough under pressure and isn't good enough at reading coverages and identifying pressure to get the ball out and win that way. So they have to avoid that, in my opinion. Now let's flip to the other side of the football, where we've got the Chiefs offense versus the Eagles defense. And this is the most fascinating side of the football. There's a lot more nuance to this one, but there's plenty of more props to come inside this discussion, okay? The Chiefs are coming off their highest scoring game of the season. The Eagles defense, on the other hand, tied for first in success rate this season with the Houston Texans. They were second in pass defense success rate as well this season. The Eagles, one thing to note about their defense is they play the second highest rate of nickel defense in the NFL. And since Cooper DeJean, their rookie defensive back, got the start in week 5, they have allowed a all-time low 4.2 yards per play out of their nickel package in the next gen era, okay? So this is the best defense on a yards per play basis out of nickel defense in the history of next gen stats, which I think is like 2016, all right? It's not too far, but it's pretty big, right? So this Eagles defense is absolutely legit. I think it's actually better than people know or think, okay? Now, when it comes to Vic Fangio and Patrick Mahomes, there's a stat that's circulating that Patrick Mahomes is 8-0 against Vic Fangio. But let's break this down a little bit more, and let's talk about this with a little bit more nuance. So yes, he has a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio. All right, I think it's like 10-2. But Fangio has limited the Chiefs to only 21.6 offensive points per game. Considering that Mahomes' points per game is closer to 28 throughout his career, that's like a touchdown difference, all right? The one thing I noticed is that lately playing Fangio, Mahomes tends to throw a lot more incompletions than usual. He actually has a 59.7 completion rate. That is not good. That's under 60 over his last 5 games playing Vic Fangio. He's been held under 300 yards in every single one of the last 4 games. He averages only 1.25 passing touchdowns for his career against Fangio and only 6.5 yards per attempt over his last 4 games. So more incompletions, not a lot of touchdowns, not a lot of yards, and his yards per attempt dips. So actually, in fact, Fangio does a good job against Mahomes. He's very familiar with him. He faced him a lot in Denver, and he took a lot of that to Miami. One of the things to understand about the Miami game is that he had a lot of injuries in that game in the playoffs, where it actually changed how Fangio defended him. In that game, he sent 0 blitzes, so 0 coverage, meaning no safeties, everybody's blitzing up front, 18 times in the game, which is something that Fangio doesn't do. For reference, this year, the Eagles 4-man rush a ton, all right? So they are only a 16% blitz team in the playoffs and 19% in the regular season. That's very low. And they play a lot of too high safety defenses, which was actually kind of a big feature of how teams were trying to slow down the Chiefs in the first place, because they're trying to make Mahomes less bomb-oriented and more check-down-oriented with Tyreek Hill. They have since totally drastically changed their identity of their offense, as we'll get to in a little bit. But I could see the success that Fangio had in that playoff game at getting after Mahomes. A lot of teams are not successful at blitzing Mahomes, but he was in that game. I wouldn't be shocked if situationally he pulled that out, especially considering how good his secondary is and how he could rely on his secondary to make some tight coverage on the outside and play a little bit of man coverage on the outside occasionally. Now, the Philly defense is also great against motion. The Chiefs are great in terms of their motion usage. 6th in the NFL. Philly is number 1 in QBR and number 1 in yards per play allowed when teams motion. So they're not a defense that's going to get confused by the Chiefs like they did in that Super Bowl and Super Bowl 57 with all those motions at the goal line. Remember that? I don't think that will happen in this game. And then the last thing to mention about the history between Fangio and Mahomes is that his offense has sucked. I mean, they scored 6 points, 3 points, 16 points, 16 points, 9 points, 24 points was the most, 14, and then 7. They've never scored a lot of points. So if the Eagles can score a bit of points, that will also change how Fangio's defense performs. Now, ultimately, our first prop here is going to be that Mahomes is going to attempt a lot of passes because it's seemingly the Andy Reid game plan against Fangio is to throw with a lot of volume. The last 3 games against Philadelphia, against Fangio, I shouldn't say against Philadelphia, but against Fangio, Mahomes has attempted 40 plus times, okay? 40 plus attempts through the air the last 3 games. And he also has over 40 plus attempts 3 times in the Super Bowl. So at 35.5, I like the over for Patrick Mahomes passing attempts, all right? That's our first prop. I think that's correlated to his Super Bowl performance, their Super Bowl game plans, and also Fangio game plans. Now, the key to the game for the Eagles defense is making Patrick Mahomes hold the ball. And the key for the Chiefs is getting the ball out. Because what you don't want is for the Eagles to get a pass rush on you because they have many mismatches, as we'll get to. But if Mahomes is able to read the coverages quick, diagnose, okay, this is cover 4, this is cover 2. Okay, here he's playing man. It's zero blitz. If he can see it, he can believe it. If he can get it out quick and he understands who he's going to have hot on the play to get to, then he's going to be able to dink, dunk, and dice this defense of the Philadelphia Eagles. But if you force Mahomes to hold the ball, that's when you beat Mahomes. The Chiefs are 19-15 in games where Mahomes holds the ball for an average of 3 seconds. This year, the only loss that the Chiefs had, he held the ball for 3.35 seconds against the Bills in Week 11. That was the only loss they had. Mahomes wins nearly 90% of his games where he gets rid of the ball in under 3 seconds, meaning when Andy Reid's scheme is working and when teams are not challenging the Chiefs receivers, Mahomes wins. Mahomes has not held the ball longer than 2.65 seconds in any of his last 4 games, so getting it out quicker has been kind of key to what they've been doing late in the season. The Eagles, though, unfortunately for Philadelphia, do allow quarterbacks to get the ball out at about 2.7 seconds, which is actually the 3rd fastest time in the NFL. So the Eagles, because they play a lot of match coverage and they rush 4 a lot and they don't blitz a lot, typically, and also because they have a good pass rush and teams want to get the ball out fast, typically teams get the ball out fast against Philadelphia. That is the formula to beat the Eagles. A lot of quick throws. All right, that's what teams have been doing. The Rams, the Commanders, hasn't led to a ton of success overall. Like, I don't really know the numbers behind that, but just in terms of Mahomes in particular, if the Eagles can bump the receivers, get them off rhythm, disguise their coverages more because it's Super Bowl. You've had 2 weeks to disguise these. You've had 2 weeks to work on your safety rotations, 2 weeks to work on your simulated pressures. If Fangio can find some tricks, basically, for Mahomes and make him hold the ball, that's how they win this game on defense because their pass rush will get there. Now, when you look at their pass rush, some key matchups here, and X factors. Of course, you have Jalen Carter, who leads the NFL in the playoffs with 20 pressures. That's 9 more than second place Chris Jones. You have beside him, perhaps the X factor of the game, Milton Williams, who will see a lot of one-on-one matchups because Jalen Carter will be doubled constantly like he is Chris Jones on the other side, right? Milton Williams was 2nd in the NFL in pass rushing grade from the interior position this year. He has 10 pressures in the playoffs, which is tied for the 2nd most with Chris Jones. He will be taking on Mike Caliendo, the backup left guard, because Joe Thuney has slid to the left tackle position. Mike Caliendo allowed a sack and 10 pressures versus Buffalo alone. He also allowed 2 hits from Ed Oliver, and Phillips had a sack. So the interior D-line of the Bills was most successful out of anybody at getting to Mahomes in their limited ability to get to Mahomes last week or, in the AFC Championship. Nolan Smith has also been a demon from the edge, 15 pressures, 4 sacks in the playoffs, which is a Philadelphia Eagle record. And an interesting note about him is that he played 150 of his 178 snaps on the left. And why I say that is because Mahomes is a right-handed quarterback who often runs to his right. So Nolan Smith is a 4.4 40-second defensive end. He's small, he's twitchy, he's quick, he's finesse. He can run down Patrick Mahomes, which is key to containment. And I will be intrigued to see what Fangio does from a containment standpoint. Does he allow Carter and Milton Williams to really just rush up the field and he contains and traps the edges? Or does he just let them roam free and let Mahomes escape when he can? But then, Nolan Smith might run you down or Zach Bond might take your head off. So he might take some chances with that. but typically Fangio does not contain. So if you're looking for a Mahomes prop rushing wise, I wouldn't be too scared in that regard. I would just also say that teams and quarterbacks have not really ran on the Eagles all year. Actually, there's only been 2 quarterbacks that have ran for over the rushing yard prop of Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, 30.5, and it was Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. So just putting that out there. When it comes to the quick game, we talked about how you can avoid a good pass rush, right? Nolan Smith has been 4 sacks, all 15 pressures. You got Jalen Carter that you're going to have to double team. You got Joe Tooney playing out of position against Sweat or Brandon Graham. And on the other side, you got Milton Williams against a backup guard. So there's going to be plenty of matchups for the Eagles and not a slippery turf like there was in Super Bowl 57. So quick game is extremely important. Now, can the Chiefs execute in this regard? They're going to have to find some different ways because the Eagles are good at defending this. Now, Patrick Mahomes has targeted receivers behind the line of scrimmage at a career high 26.9% of his attempts, resulting in 851 passing yards. That's the second most in the NFL. A league high 45 first downs. He's only behind Baker Mayfield in his yardage. Okay, he has accounted for 5 of the top 6 seasons since 2016. Throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage. It's a huge part of their offense. They love to throw screens. They love to throw RPOs. They love to throw quick, and they love to get yak, okay? He has thrown only 7 passes for completions over 10 yards. Over 10 yards, not 20, 10, okay? He also has only 26% of his passes all season go for beyond 20 yards down the field. Hit beyond 20 yards, so air yards, okay? That's the worst in the league by far. So they're all about that short area quick game. And that has been the way the teams have been able to manufacture yards against the Eagles, like the Commanders recently, on top of Jaden Daniels' legs and things like that. But it's a painful existence. Like, it is very slow, very methodical. And the Commanders, that led to more plays, more turnovers, more sacks, more mistakes, and more opportunity for the Eagles as well. And everything was difficult for the Commanders. And the Commanders are very good at that area of their game as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that transfers for the Chiefs. Are they more productive in that manner? The Eagles defense, the reason I bring these stats up is because they are the best at defending this. They have allowed the fewest yards per attempt and the lowest success rate on passes thrown behind the line of scrimmage this year. They have also allowed the lowest yards after catch over expected. Kansas City is reliant on yards after catch in their offense, more reliant than any team. 61.5% of receiving yards after the catch. So I believe that the Chiefs are going to have to throw a lot of quick game, but I actually think it should be more from a drop back sense and not necessarily screens. I think that is going to get them in trouble. But if they go with more of a quick, 5 to 10 yard area of the field type of quick game where they get their tight ends and their slot receivers involved, like Juju Smith-Schuster, who I like to go over his prop of 1.5 receptions at minus 135 or over 13.5 receiving yards, both of those at minus 140. I like Juju because I like his ability to, in the slot, get open against zone, be able to find the spaces, and then be able to create after the catch because he's difficult to tackle. We also saw him perform in the Super Bowl a couple years ago in some big spots. But Juju, I think somebody that's going to benefit. I see lesser of a role for D-Hop, but he could make a couple plays, and I definitely would go under Marquise Brown's receiving yards at 42.5 because I think he's a bad matchup for Slay or for Quinyon Mitchell, both who can run with him in my opinion, but also I think the body types, the matchups one-on-one, they're not great matchups, and I think Hollywood is more of that intermediate and deep level player where I feel like the Chiefs will be very focused on the quick game and defeating this pass rush and not allowing this pass rush getting anything going. I could also see maybe the Chiefs taking some calculated shots off play action, but I would look for that to be maybe to their tight ends like Kelsey or even like Worthy in this game. I don't necessarily feel like Marquise Hollywood Brown will be that involved. I don't really see it. I mean, unless they put Quinyon on Worthy the entire game and they never ask him to cover Hollywood, but I'm going to go with those two props in terms of the receiving game. I like Juju because of the RPO sense of the game plan. And we're also going to talk about the tight ends here. So a lot of people want to know about Travis Kelce. The Eagles did allow the lowest yards per catch to tight ends this season. And as you guys can see, a lot of statistics here favor the Eagles. Like Their team is loaded, their offense is good, and their defense is the best in the league by far. I mean, you look at these metrics, it's just unbelievable across the board. Kelce and Gray, I think they could find matchups on the inside. Why? Because of the recent success tight ends have had against the Eagles. Ertz had 16 targets, 11 catches, 104 yards in the NFC Championship. Higbee had 10 targets, 7 catches for 54 yards and a touchdown. So Kelce could see some success, but I know that the Eagles are going to be probably trying to shadow him with somebody like Cooper DeJean quite often, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's why a guy like Juju had more catches, because they're moving their nickel corner to play on the tight end and not necessarily on the third receiver. So maybe they're putting an extra corner on the field, or they're shifting their coverages somehow. I wouldn't be surprised if DeJean played more on Kelce than usual, or even CJ Gardner-Johnson took that responsibility at times. I think that Noah Gray will also benefit from this when the Chiefs go with 2 tight ends. And 2 tight ends is interesting because the Eagles play so much nickel that putting 2 tight ends on the field gets you bigger up front and allows you potentially to run the ball a bit better than you would out of 3 receiver sets, right? But Noah Gray, I like going over 1.5 receptions. He's a sneaky good player, very good against zone. He won't be an option that the Eagles are really looking to take away from this game. It will primarily be Worthy. It will primarily be Kelce. I don't necessarily see Gray being one of those guys. And I do think the Chiefs will try to rely on 2 tight end sets because they want to get bigger than the Eagles out there, or they want to be able to match physicality up front. Maybe even chip in terms of protections, but also in terms of running the ball, which is kind of the last conversation on this side of the football. The Chiefs' ability to win Super Bowl 57 really came down to their ability to run the ball. A lot of people forget about this, but Mahomes had under 200 yards in that game. Pacheco had 15 carries for 76 yards and 5.1 yards per carry. I do believe the primary back here will be Kareem Hunt, and I do think Kareem Hunt will score a touchdown. That will be our next prop, plus 140, anytime touchdown for Kareem Hunt. He is going to get the ball, I think, 10 to 17 times in this game on the ground. I think in the red zone, he is their preferred option. He's a great short yardage option. And given how much they play nickel, I think they will be able to get some short yardage. They will be able to body the Eagles a little bit at times, but I don't think it will be overwhelming. But McKinnon also had 8.5 yards per carry. Mahomes had 7.3 yards per carry. So the Chiefs were able to run the ball in that Super Bowl a couple years ago, but the Eagles are much better against the run this year than they were back then if you look at it statistically. That being said, the Eagles like to defend the run with light boxes more than any team in the league, 68.5%. So the opposite of what we talked about with the Chiefs, probably stacking the box, the Eagles are going to be defending it with light personnel, right? And the Eagles also, they do allow 3.45 yards after contact per run with a light box, which is the 6th highest in the NFL. The Chiefs never are stuffed at the line very often. That's the second lowest rate at 6.3%. So that correlates. If they cannot get stuffed, they can maybe lead to more yards after contact, which should lead to maybe a deceptively successful running day for them, especially if they look to go to 2 tight ends. They look to get under center a little bit more, like the Rams did, who had a little bit of success against the Eagles running the ball, right? 13 carries, 89 yards against light boxes was a key part of their night in Super Bowl 57. So watch out for the running game as a key X factor. One thing that does hurt the Chiefs, though, is that with Joe Thuney at left tackle, they've been much worse running the ball with only 3.5 yards per carry since making that move. So the Chiefs just haven't been very good at running the ball this year, and especially with Joe Thuney at left tackle. But that could be the make or break of whether or not they can win this game, because it will take relief off of Mahomes throwing the ball, take relief off of the pass protection, and keep them steady and consistent, which their offense is all about consistency, right? This was the team that led the NFL in plays and time of possession per drive. Okay, they're all about making their third downs 3rd and 6, which is their average this year, 3rd and 6. If they get to 3rd and 6, they're going to be in a decent spot. I like the Chiefs punting the ball more because I think there's going to be more stops for the Eagles just because they have outright so many advantages. Like we discussed, the quick game, their pass rush, their run defense, a lot of things favor the Eagles. So I think the Chiefs offense will have some drives where they're able to put together some long, consistent drives with a lot of plays and a lot of time of possession, a lot of dinking and dunking, and that will happen, but I think they'll also punt more. They're also a less aggressive team because they don't have the glitch that is the tush push, okay? So minus 105 for the Chiefs to have more punts in the game. Second, though, I like fourth down conversions over 2.5 at plus 120 because a team will be trailing. They'll have to go for it at some point. That's going to give you one. I think the Eagles will probably go for it, maybe even in the first quarter on like a 4th and 1 at their own 40. That could very well happen. And then probably in the red zone, some team's going to go for it on a 4th and short as well, probably the Eagles. So I think a fourth down, very likely to go over 2.5 at plus 120. Now, the predictions, all right? We've sat through the sides of the football, all the X factors, all the matchups, all the props, but we have 4 final props here that I want to get to. Props/predictions, all right? Now, there's very few areas that the Eagles don't have an advantage. When you really dive into this game, the Eagles should win this game. They're the better, more talented team. They have the better offensive line. They probably have the much better defense. They have a better receiving core. But I have bet against the Chiefs so many times, I'm almost sick of it. I'm sick of me continually being wrong, despite, like a team like the Eagles, if they win this game, you could go on to say, like, this is one of the best teams we've seen. This is a very stacked team. But I think the Chiefs have a couple things that are to their advantage. First of all, they've got the coaching edge. I trust Andy Reid to put together a game plan against Vic Fangio's defense. I trust Spagnuolo to be able to defend Saquon and confuse Jalen Hurts. And they have an offensive style that should allow them to move the ball, despite that line of scrimmage stuff and throwing the ball behind the line, the Eagles' ability to defend it. I saw enough success from the Commanders. I've seen enough success from the Rams where Nakobe Dean being out is a factor. Like, I feel like the Chiefs with Mahomes, if they can keep the game close defensively early on, they can start to get some plays, they can start to string together some drives of some surgicality, right? Like a lot of 5-yard passes, a lot of quick game, a lot of Tom Brady versus the Legion of Boom, like just 4 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards, like a lot of that sort of stuff. I don't think they're going to create a lot of explosives. So if the Eagles are able to get ahead, if the Eagles are able to really put the Chiefs down, I don't think the Chiefs can come back this time because I think the Eagles' defense and their pass rush is too good this time, and I don't think they're explosive enough to make it happen. But I don't think that will happen. Now, a couple different predictions. If Kansas City wins, which will be my pick, 24-23 will be my score with probably a last-second field goal from Harrison Butker. If the Eagles win, I expect it to be by 2 scores, 30-21, a 9-point win, similar to that Bills game that they lost in Week 11, where the Eagles put it away with a late touchdown, and the Chiefs just aren't able to answer with enough time left on the clock. I think that would be the surprising result. My bets that correlate with this, or picks, would be the Eagles in the first half, money line minus 105. I think when you look at Kansas City's Super Bowl history, they trail in the first half. That's just what they do. Tampa Bay, San Francisco, both times. The Eagles the first time. They trailed in all of those games. Even the games they won, which they've won most of them, they have trailed, right? Kansas City, if they win this game, I think you're good at betting Kansas City by 1 to 6 points, essentially one score. 1 to 6 points at plus 290. If you don't want to cheer for the Chiefs, this is a good way to bet on them. And I like both teams to score 20 plus points at minus 130. There's a little bit of juice there, but I feel like both teams will get at least 20, probably within 20 to 20, within 20 to 30. Most realistically, I think both teams land in that range. I don't think it will be as high scoring as last time they played. My MVP pick, it's most likely going to be Mahomes, but I am going to say that the best bet would be Saquon Barkley at plus 240 because I think that he has the narrative. It's his birthday. He is the best player in the NFL right now, probably, and he'll be setting a record in this game. And I also believe that he could score multiple touchdowns. And if the Eagles win, it's very likely because he has 100 yards, he has a touchdown or two, he maybe has a big play, and he puts the game away. So my favorite bet would be Saquon for MVP, but my pick will be Patrick Mahomes, unfortunately. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was a little bit of a longer video for OwnersBox Fantasy, but I hope you guys enjoyed and took away something from it. Let me know your favorite pick in the comment section below, your favorite bet. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for hanging with me all season. Off-season content on the way. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time. Have fun with the Super Bowl, and good luck. Peace.